Men, your experiences matter too. What's your story of a woman being the creep? She took a friend of mine home to sleep it off, but had intimacy with him while he was intoxicated. If he hadn't seen evidence, she couldn't rehook up his medical equipment correctly. He'd never have known she did it, and she never mentioned it until he confronted her with the evidence. My friend group was very hypocritical about this, and I dropped anyone who said that this wasn't a serious crime and a reason to avoid it forever. Story 2. When I was a teenager, my family and I accompanied my grandmother to the hospital. They sent a translator automatically after learning English was her second language. The translator wasn't needed, but hung around just in case. She spent that time telling my mother how attractive I was, which then evolved to her telling me directly how attractive I am. I can recall comments including on my height, build, and skin tone. She asked about my relationships and poked around if I was active. My mom separated us after she overheard her asking for my phone. The lady was in between my mother and my grandmother's age. Story 3. I had just started at a new company. This was inside my first week. I was sitting in my cubicle, snacking from a bag of mixed nuts when a lady probably in her 40s walked by and stopped. She said, can I have some of your nuts? I really like nuts, but said it in a very weird tone. I said, very flatly, sure, and handed her the bag. She said, oh, no, well, never mind, and limped away. She had some weird hip thing. She left, she looked at the project assistant sitting across from me and said, I guess I didn't get it, and cackled. The PA looked at me and just rolled her eyes. I went back to work. Over the next year or so, she would make all kinds of weird innuendos like this, and I would reply as flatly as I could. Until one day my boss heard her and just said, Kim, cut it out. They ended up running out of work for her to do after a while and let her go. Story 4. More than a few years ago, I dated this girl for about 3 months and we were at my parents' house for New Year's Eve and she slipped a ring into my pocket throughout the night at some point. Later on, when I was walking her home, I realized I had this ring in my pocket and asked her if she knew anything about this. And she said she wanted me to propose. I very quickly said no as we were only 3 months into our relationship. On the first day back from winter break, I found loads of congratulations and weird crap in my locker. She had told the whole school I had proposed and that she was pregnant. The next day I broke up with her because obviously none of this was okay. Fast forward 7 months and I found out the night we broke up, she tried to code in her ADHD meds and my friend had to call the ambulance to her house at 3 a.m. Later that week, she tried to pay my pretty techie friend to delete all the suggestive pictures she had sold online in the last few days. After not seeing her for 9 months, she makes an alternate FB account to say she's 2 months pregnant with my phantom baby and how she likes to sit outside my window and think about me at night. After calling the police and a week of police sitting in the driveway, she starts a rumor that I watch her sleep at night. Her family has caught me on the new security cameras they installed. Luckily, I have not heard a word or any other weird rumors in 7 years. Story 5. This one woman at a local bar about twice my age was pestering me for a dance and not taking no for an answer. At one point she was dancing against me, trying to sit on my lap, constantly asking me for a kiss, etc. Everyone at the table was super uncomfortable. Eventually, me and my friends dipped while she was in the toilet and switched bars. Later learned from a friend who frequents that first bar that she did that kind of thing regularly. Story 6. I was 15 and she was a bit younger, maybe 12 or 13. She was my sister's friend. She was very forward about wanting to do things to me. She made me really uncomfortable and I wasn't really ready for whatever it was she wanted from me. To then get comments from my dad like, sounds like you're in there, and I started to question why I passed up on the opportunity to possibly have intimacy with a girl. For a guy back then, and probably today too, sadly, the idea of just plain not wanting intimacy made you deficient, somehow. I feel like girls are pretty well taught to be wary of boys and to understand that they can say no. Unfortunately, the same is not true for boys. Story 7. A woman in my building had a crush on me. I wasn't interested. She had a beautiful friend that suddenly befriended my roommates, thus both of them were invited to our apartment for parties. I assumed there was a plot here. She, not the roommate, followed me around the apartment, trying to flirt a lot, always having me kindly turn her down. Finally, when we were alone in the kitchen, where she wouldn't be embarrassed, I told her I wasn't interested as politely as I could. She seemed to get the message. A few weekends later, I get home after partying with other friends, sloshed. The 2 women and my roommates are hanging out in the apartment. I go straight to bed. I woke up a few hours later with her in my bed, under the covers, trying to wake me up. I tell her to leave. She starts crying. I was very, very intoxicated, so I really just wanted to go to sleep. She's getting dressed and crying and passed back out. I woke up to her still in my room, giving my back a massage. I tell her again to get the hell out. She laughs it off and asks to see my thing. I vaguely remember her trying to grab my thing, but I was laying on my stomach. I also vaguely remember her getting under the covers 2 to 3 more times that night. Before I finally got up, went to my roommate's room and fell asleep on his floor. Apparently, according to the woman, I was a schmuck for not letting her do me. Story 8. This story may not belong here, but it's worth noting. I met these two freshmen when I was a junior. They're both cute. One liked one of my roommates. I wish the other liked me, but she didn't seem interested. I got home one night to an empty apartment. I passed out on the couch watching a movie. In our apartment, we had one of those doors that has a card key to open and close it with a bolt lock. We often forgot our card keys, so the first one home would rig the front door with a bolt out, so the door wasn't able to automatically lock or close. I know, it was stupid, but it's what we did. I guess the freshman who didn't like my friend decided she wanted to see if I was home. I wake up to her kissing me. I'm 100% okay with this. She ends up staying the night. It's worth noting that I'd never spoken to this woman for more than 20 minutes and that I was in a room with about 15 other people. We didn't have any sort of relationship other than drinking once or twice before in a crowded apartment. I share this story because it wasn't necessarily a creepy story, but if roles were reversed and I just walked into a woman's apartment and started making out with her when she was sleeping, I'm sure it would have been looked at in a different light. Story 9. I was typing notes in a laptop. My classmate, next to me, asked to see my laptop so she can copy notes she just missed. I gave it to her. She types her number in my notes. I don't notice it until later in the week, but I'm not interested, so I don't call her. She sits beside me at the next class and asks if I saw the note she made. I told her I was flattered, but I was already seeing someone. I was not, but I felt awkward telling her I wasn't interested in front of our fellow classmates in earshot. She asks if I have Facebook. I tell her yes. She friends me not 5 minutes later. Class begins. She, in a loud whisper, says, "Your profile says you're single." I tell her I'm not officially dating anyone, but I like someone and it's in the early stages. Lie. She then says, "Well, then you can still take me on a date." I tell her thanks, but no. Now she begins getting louder. Not screaming, but being loud enough for the professor to hear. "Well, if you didn't want to take me out, why wouldn't you just say that 5 minutes ago? Who's the other girl?" There were a few more angry or loud questions. I don't know how I reacted, but I hate when attention is drawn to me, so I imagine I was just not responding and looking at the presentation. I forget her exact last words, but it was something along the lines of, "Well, you're not man enough to handle me anyway." To which the class begins laughing. The professor asks me to take the discussion outside. I tell him I have nothing to discuss with her. The professor then told me that I disrupted the class and to come back when I'm more able to manage my relationships. So I left and she followed, and I just kept speed walking outside until she stopped following me. There's been a few more, but I'll leave it with this last one from a few weeks ago. Story 10. I matched with a cute woman on Tinder and we met for drinks. The convo went well and I was into her. She asked me to walk her to her car, then on the way there she proceeded to jump me, making out. I was fine with this, except I hate PDA and there were people in the well-lit parking lot. I tell her I don't like making out in front of people, so she tells me to get into her car. We go in the back seat and make out more. This is better, but not great. I tell her I don't want to have intimacy with people in earshot, and literally 10 feet away. I offer to bring her to my house. She says no. I offer to take her to her house. She says no. Now, there's no way she would have known this, but I was attacked in a car, sitting in a parking lot when I was a teenager, so my mind is having flashbacks of that, then reminding me that there are people close by, and this conspiracy starts to form that she's trying to get me so one of these people can come by and easily rob me. My rational brain thinks this is a stupid thought, but I can't push the thought out of my mind. I tell her I don't feel comfortable having intimacy right now. I tell her I'm not really comfortable having intimacy in a car. She now gets offended, probably thinking that I'm not attracted to her, but she tries one more time to convince me to have intimacy with her. When I lightly push her off, she screams, Come on! Is your thing broken?" Now people are looking in her direction from the parking lot and I have an angry Brazilian woman yelling at me. This is my nightmare. I try to explain that I don't feel comfortable having intimacy in a parking lot, in a car. I'm 35 for Christ's sake. She then yells at me to get out of her car. Apparently I'm a schmuck because I didn't want to have intimacy in a car. So, this isn't so much creepy as it was a double standard. I was attracted to her, but when I said no, it should have been respected. Story 11. When I was in my early 20s, I was doing some work in a duplex apartment unit in a complex with several other duplexes. It was a nice spring day, so I had the front door open to get some fresh air. A woman that lived in the complex came to the door and stood just inside, chatting me up. She was flirty, but I didn't think much of it. She eventually asked me what I was doing for lunch, and I said I was skipping lunch, so she asked me to come over and she would make me a sandwich. I thanked her, but declined. She was very persistent about offering me a sandwich, and she wasn't taking no for an answer. Pretty soon, I realized sandwich was code for intimacy. I still kept resisting, and it went from being amusing to creepy. Finally, she disappeared for a minute, so I packed up my tools and hit the road. As I was going down the road, this car pulled up beside me, and it was this lady telling me to pull over. I pretended like I couldn't see her and just sped up until she was gone. Now my wife and I refer to making a sandwich as our code for intimacy. On a funny note, I used to get really hungry after intimacy, and more than once I made a sandwich because of it. Story 12. I was a server in a restaurant and had two girls walk in. I go over to introduce myself, saying my first name like usual, and the first three things one girl says in order are, "Are you straight? Are you single? Do you want my number?" She wasn't attractive, and it's pretty difficult to dodge that when I have to now serve her table for the remainder of the shift. So I disappeared for 5 to 6 minutes. Check my phone. I have someone new add me on Snapchat and Instagram. Walk back to the table and she tells me she was able to find it anyways. I asked someone else to deal with him for the remainder of the night, but I was pretty shocked that someone would do that with my social media from just a first name while working. Story 13. When I was around 20 years old, I was at a club that used to be mostly for gay men but had become a club for everyone. There were two women who told me they were over 50 and told me that they are cougars who go to those bars specifically to fool around with much younger guys. I told them that I'm gay and not interested. I was polite about it. They kept insisting that I should leave with them, that they could turn me straight, etc. One of them eventually just grabbed my back. The whole time I was saying that I wasn't interested, that I'm gay and that they need to leave me alone. When they grabbed me, I just walked out, completely left the club and started heading home. Didn't report it because I assumed that I'd just be laughed at and be mocked for not liking the behavior. It's been 8 years since then and I'm still tempted to get a rainbow tattooed on me in case it happens again. I figure that showing a tattoo may be a good signal that I'm being serious. Story 14. Not long after graduating high school and about to start college, I moved to a new house with my parents. Very night we moved in, I got a Facebook message from a girl I had never met but had a few mutual friends with, asking if I just moved into that town. I thought, oh well, she's attractive, maybe something will come of it. We started hanging out. She would always send suggestive Snapchats. This was all fine with me until I realized she had a boyfriend. I called her out on it, and her excuse was, "Oh, we're just talking." That was far from true. They'd been together for a while. I started to back off on replying and hanging out with her because I wouldn't want that done to me. I then started getting daily texts asking what I was doing. I'd see her car or leave her house, and not 2 minutes later, she would start texting, even when I didn't reply. I was still getting Snapchats from her. I told her to screw off and that I had started dating someone, then blocked her on everything. Then she started texting from different numbers. She eventually gave up, but it was nearly a year of pestering. Story 15. At a job a few years ago, there was this woman I worked with, and she was very much into me, and I just didn't feel the same. Plain and simple. But despite talking to her countless times, telling her I didn't feel the same, I don't want to date a coworker and that I wanted her to stop. She would always hit on me, make suggestive comments, stare at me, and so on. Management wouldn't do crap about it because to them, and most of the rest of the world, men can't be mistreated. You should be lucky that you're getting attention. This woman sucked and was a creep and I hated her. I got a new job as soon as I could. Story 16. About 5 years ago, I went to an anime convention cosplaying as a popular character at the time, Victor from Yuri on Ice, and I was probably one of the only men at this particular one dressed as him. A lot of girls asked me for pictures, and while a lot were nice and pleasant, more than a few tried to grab me inappropriately, and even one tried to kiss me and seemed mad that I didn't like it. I haven't cosplayed him since, and my enjoyment of the series is somewhat ruined because of that experience. At work, I occasionally have customers touch my hair. These are usually older women and get angry when I tell them no or get away. A few customers have touched my back and hoped I wouldn't say anything. Sometimes it happens right in front of a manager. They usually don't see anything. I can't help but feel a little bitter. One time there was a male coworker who did the same to a female coworker and he was fired pretty much instantly. He got what he deserved, of course, but I can't help but feel a little bitter that I wasn't helped. I was also essayed by an ex and don't like being touched in general, especially by women. The only girl I've dated since then tried to be receptive, but that ended up being a lie. I told her that when we started seeing each other regularly and she said she was okay with it, I eventually got to the point where I could trust her enough to touch her and kiss her and cuddle. But intimacy was still off the table for now. I understand people have needs and many relationships are built on physical attraction in addition to emotional, but I thought she was okay with it because she said she was. Eventually, she said, trying to joke, "If you don't sleep with me one of these days, I'm going to slip something into your drink." I was upset with this, and she started calling me a baby. She cheated, and the relationship ended after. Story 17. Before I met my wife, I dated a woman in our second time hanging out at a bar. She got too intoxicated and asked me point blank if, get more comfortable with her and do substances back at her place. It made me anxious, and I pretty much immediately asked for the bill and plotted my exit. When she realized I wasn't interested, she accused me of being gay and followed me to our subway transit system, laughing like a maniac, asking me to stay and making fun of me some more. If the roles were reversed here, I imagine some dudes would have gotten involved and gone violent with me about it. When I was in my early 20s, two girls at a party cornered me and began asking me questions about how big my thing was, which they'd heard about from another friend of theirs that I slept with. It was weird, inappropriate, and not cool. If I cornered some lady at a house party and began asking inappropriate things, I'd get my bum kicked. The more I think about things, the more inappropriate and weird memories pop up of women being creeps to me. At the time, I just laugh it off, but nowadays I'm realizing how anxiety-inducing these incidents really were. I'm a millennial who grew up during an era where we were taught to protect and respect women. I don't ever remember being taught about how guys can be victims. Story 18. Not sure if creepy, but stressful, nonetheless. Was out at a bar on a Saturday night, and a girl whom I was casually acquainted with came up next to me to order a bucket of beer. We had only met like one time prior through mutual friends. There wasn't any flirting or anything like that. We said hey, and she told me she was out with a bachelorette party, and then I said, sounds like a hoot. Hope you guys have a good night. 10 minutes later, me and my friends were ready to leave. I went to the bar to close my tab and decided to buy them a bucket of beer to be nice. It was like $12 for the bucket. Not a big deal. I told the bartender the bucket was for their bachelorette party, paid, and left without saying a word to their table. 3 blocks down the road, and I hear some girls calling my name from behind me. They chased me down the street to tell me that they didn't want my beers, and that they weren't going to sleep with me just because I bought them alcohol. I was very confused and could only respond with, what? They told me it was sexist of me to buy them beers and that they knew I was just trying to have intimacy with them. I just decided to turn and walk away. They followed me for another 30 seconds or so, yelling at me how much of a schmuck I was, and of course, all the onlookers took their side. And to avoid fights with 2 random large groups of other guys who blindly took their side, they literally stalked me, chased me, and pestered me, all because I sent their table some beers on my way out the door without ever even approaching the table. Well, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 19. I worked as a barkeeper or waiter in a higher class bar for 2 years and have a lot of stories to tell. I just got out of a really toxic relationship that devastated me, so I hit the gym 5 to 6 times a week. I was pretty shredded, which paid off for the tips I got, especially from women aged 40 and up. There was one woman in particular who really creeped me out. She came around early evening with some friends and they had a few cocktails. I had the closing shift, so I started sending my coworkers home around 1 a.m. Eventually, I was the only one left with 2 tables to serve. One of the tables was the woman with her friend. They asked me for a cigarette and I gave her and her friend one and they invited me to join. So I did. Because it was a late shift, no one gave a damn what we did after 1 a.m. We had a pretty nice conversation and she started to come closer, but I didn't care because I was basically used to some more mature women trying their shot after a few drinks. I told her that I was very sorry but not interested at all. She accepted it at first, said that she was sorry, paid, and left a little embarrassed. Again, I didn't care and hadn't spared a thought about the situation. So I closed the bar for that evening and went to my locker room, and there she was, in our back office. She wore a nice dress, which she lifted a little bit. I basically told her in a nice way to take off and reiterated that I was not interested in her. She ignored me and tried to get closer. Again, I told her to leave and took a step back into the guest room. We had some cameras there, so I tried to get in sight. Maybe a security guard was still there and saw what was happening. Basically, I knew that I was screwed either way if I didn't manage to get into the camera's vision. She pulled some silverish thing, which I identified as a knife at that moment. She looked at me and told me that I now do as she says or it will end badly for me. Luckily, there was still a security guard left who called the cops on her. As the cops arrived, her whole personality changed and she started to shiver and told the cops that I was pestering her. The security showed them the videotapes and they arrested her. Never did the closing shift alone again. I never saw her again and she never came back. Still, that's pretty scary and creepy. I left the bar a year later. Story 20. I used to attend conventions cosplaying as Bane, Dark Knight Rises. It's far too often that I'd be walking down the hall and someone would just run up and grab my back, giggle to themselves, then run off. And unrelated to the above, this might be beyond the scope of creep, but saying no repeatedly and her doing it anyway. We break up, she takes me to court trying to convince people I'm a threat. Fails. I go to therapy over the whole situation just to be told by a female therapist that I can't have problems because I'm a straight white man. Later, I found a better psychologist and am diagnosed with PTSD. Fast forward a little bit. Started streaming to help cope with depression or anxiety and gain a little bit of a following. One particular viewer becomes overly attached. I tell her I'm not looking for any kind of romantic relationship. Several times. She doesn't take no for an answer. Offers to rent a hotel room between us so we can meet up and pushes for my real name because screaming my stream name while doing it feels weird. I tell her again that no means no and to stop it. She goes into a rage and tries to gaslight me. I ban or block her for the safety of myself and my community. Don't get out much anymore. Story 21. I had the displeasure of working with this girl. She's one of those crystal and horoscope girls who became obsessed with me for some stupid reason. Anyway, she did things that made me uncomfortable, like making way too much eye contact. For example, she'd be laughing really hard at something and making direct eye contact with you the whole time. Anyway, I had the unfortunate luck of having to drive her to her car one night. On the way there, I accidentally said I had to run to the store after I dropped her off, to which she was insanely persistent in wanting to go shopping with me. I then got to her car and I said, "Okay, hop out. I really need to go." Nope, she sat in my truck for 20 minutes trying to talk to me about stuff. The whole time I was trying to get her to go out so I could go. She never got the hint, so I simply stopped talking. She finally got out of my truck and I swear I couldn't drive away fast enough. I didn't even go to the store after that for fear of her following me there. She's a very unsettling person to be around, and I'm glad I got a new job and no longer have to work with her. Story 22. I had a friend get hit on by his girlfriend's mom, sophomore year of high school, and he left the girl just to never be around her house or mom again. And she contacted him on Facebook asking why he broke up with her daughter and asking if there's anything she could do to make him feel better about the situation. He took a screenshot, took it to the police, and made a report. He was very uncomfortable from the first time meeting her and would tell me about everything she would say or do to him. I honestly think he told me about it as much as he did because he was afraid of her and wanted someone to know, hey, if I ever go missing, look at this chick. Story 23. My time has arrived, my fellow men. Grab some popcorn and buckle up for a journey. So there was this girl at work. I worked at a restaurant at the time, who had a major crush on me, but I was young or inexperienced and didn't notice. She asked me if I'd join her for a drink after a shift. I accepted and we went to a bar, had a few cocktails and chatted. An hour or so into the evening, she admitted that she had a crush on me. Being the awkward guy I was, I said she was cute and that I would consider going out with her again. I had not thought this decision through whatsoever. Cut to a while later. We're both on the train home. We lived on opposite sides of the same town, a few stops from the place we worked, and she kissed me. Okay, I thought, and kissed back because of the alcohol. What happened next had me shook. Her hand went somewhere inappropriate and it made a noise that can only be described as a mouse being stepped on. I told her that I was not keen on my thing being handled in public and sat in a painfully awkward silence for the rest of the journey. Anyway, back at work, she began making endless remarks to me in full earshot of guests. I was too polite to tell her enough was enough. I eventually told another coworker, also male, about it all, and here's where it gets really fun. She's done this to him too. Turns out she had propositioned most of the guys at work, including a temp manager. Long story short, she ended up getting the boot. Story 24. This woman dated my brother. She faked being on birth control and almost terminated him multiple times because he wasn't ready to marry her right then and there, after tricking him into getting her pregnant. He dodged a bullet, honestly. She called upon squatters' rights to avoid getting kicked out of his house, even though she never helped pay any bills or anything, and she had an apartment and family she could go to. She constantly lied to the police about him, to the point that even the police started getting suspicious of her. She taught their child how to say bad things about him to child services. That didn't last long, though. Eventually, she gave up on the pestering. I don't know if that's a creep or a total psycho. Probably psycho. Story 25. In grad school, I had a colleague who was very physically affectionate with me. She'd hug me tight and squeal with delight. When our master's capstone project came around, we found ourselves on a team of 4, and the 2 other people bailed at the last minute. Apparently, she'd burned a lot of bridges. We started a month early on the capstone project. We had our first meeting at a local bar, but it was unambiguously a work meeting. For 2 hours, she flirted with me and kept asking for hugs. It was really gross. I kept physically distancing myself from her, and she kept closing that distance. I tried to keep us focused on the work, but she kept flirting. That project lasted 4 months, and it was pretty miserable. She had a history of lying about her romantic past with people, and I was terrified of speaking up, worried that she'd retaliate with a lie about me. And in a he said, she said scenario, given that this was at the height of the Me Too movement, I was confident they'd believe her and punish me. When she noticed I was withdrawn from the project, she forced me to confront her about it. And of course, she gave me an insincere apology. I kept my head down and prayed she wouldn't escalate things. The moment we submitted our final project, I blocked her on everything. I told the school, who supported me and took measures to prevent further mistreatment. I'm so glad that's over. Story 26. Met a girl at a club. She came home with me, and the next morning we exchanged numbers and she went on her merry way. That night, about midnight, I got a call from a weeping man talking about ending it all. It was her husband. I had no idea she was married. Anyway, I ended up spending 40 minutes on the phone with this guy. I checked her internet history and saw she had been Googling my name. He then found my number in her phone and called me. I felt awful. This poor guy. I did my best to talk him down, which is hard when you're the person who slept with his wife, and the call ended a lot calmer than it had begun. I immediately contacted her and told her never to contact me again. Next day was when she started parking outside my house, just sitting there in her car watching and occasionally trying to call. This went on for a week or 2. She also showed up at the pub I worked at, which I'd never told her about. I assumed she followed me from my flat. Things were getting creepy by then, but the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, I stumbled home from a club, this time alone. I opened the front door, and my flatmate came out of his bedroom and was like, "You're not going to believe who is here." The wee maniac had gone to the club where she had first met me, recognized my flatmate, and went out of her way to seduce him in order to get back to my place. He hadn't recognized her at first, but her weird behavior and her asking about me made him realize what was going on after she was at the flat. She tried to get into my room that night more than once. Crazy woman. I hope her husband dumped her. Story 27. This is my coworker's story, not mine. He said he was walking home from our NASA building when he realized someone was following him. He asked, "Where are you going?" The lady replied, "Just following you because you're hot." She said that startled him, so he responded, "Okay, I'm married, so please go away and let me go home." The lady then ran up to him, grabbed his shoulder, and said, "If Rick Astley is never going to let you go, I'm not either." He said, "Is this supposed to be a joke? Very funny. Now I need to go home." She then said, "It's never meant to be a joke, so look at me now." That's when he started running, but she was chasing him. He ran inside and locked the door. However, the lady wasn't giving up, so she threw a rock through the window. That's when he called the police. They didn't tell us the rest of the story after that. Story 28. Back in my late 20s, I did the online dating thing, briefly. Matched with someone and set up a dinner date after a couple of days of chatting. When date night rolls around, we got seated at a table and she goes full steam ahead with the advances. Keep in mind, we've seen each other in person for maybe 10 minutes at this point. As dinner progresses, she becomes more and more aggressive with the advances, and I decide I'm getting off the crazy train as soon as I politely can. After dinner, she claimed to be too intoxicated to drive, so I drove her home. Uber wasn't a big thing in my town at the time. When I get her home, she's almost dragging me in the door, telling me to stay the night. I decline, using a very truthful explanation of needing to be up before the sun for work, and I leave. She really wasn't taking no for an answer, and I ended up just walking away from her door. I'm definitely not the most attractive person in the world. The longer I spent around her, the more I got the feeling that I was going to be used for a quick fooling around and nothing more. Her heavy-handed innuendo and comments about what I might be packing were not sexy. I was straight up uncomfortable and had me regretting leaving my house. Story 29. I'm gay, so I got a lot of people who think it's okay to make assumptions. Here are two of the most memorable instances. High school encounter in high school. There was this girl who dropped a note in my lunch tray that said, "I like you. Will you go out with me?" I replied that I didn't know her, and she immediately said, "I'm Daisy," fake name, and I was essayed. My friend just walked off, trying to keep me from laughing or saying anything inappropriate, and I was stunned. I was polite and let her down gently, but since it wasn't a hard no, she told everyone we were dating. That was a fun rumor, especially when another girl I turned down got mad and her friend slapped me for it. That was a fun way to find out I was dating someone. Daisy kept up the obsession until I publicly told her to take off. Never saw her again. The second incident happened after I was out. I went to a club with a guy I was into and his friends. We were hanging out at the bar getting drinks when my date's very gay friend gave us help me eyes as a woman was holding onto him. I told my date to play along, went up and said, "Hey babe, there you are." This woman then said, "Oh, you really are gay?" Like she wasn't in the biggest gay club in the city. Then she asked if we wanted a triad while her boyfriend was overseas. Yikes. As for my date and his friend, they really appreciated it, and we had a fun rest of the night. Story 30. My roommate said he was freaked out by the way this girl at work acted towards him. She was weird, to put it nicely. Well, we lived near work and were the normal hangout place after work, so everyone knew where we lived. Well, I was mad at him about something. He was asleep in his room and she came over. I said he's sleeping, but she's free to go in. That was a big mess up. So he woke up with her on the bed, petting him. Then she burst into tears. Said she was going to end herself, but if he had intimacy with her, she might not end herself. And if she did, she promised to put in the letter that he didn't essay her. He politely declined, like a sane person. Then she said that it was fine. He's in bed and vulnerable, so she would just essay him, and because he was a guy, no one would believe him. And then if she ended herself, she would blame him in the letter. Crap. So he started screaming. I rushed in, we kicked her out, and threatened to call the cops if she ever came near our house, and I spent the next week apologizing. After that, she never showed up to work again. No call-in, nothing. No idea what happened to her. Like really worried she named us in her letter and cops will come knocking at any moment. Except we saw her in Walmart like 2 months later. Luckily, she didn't see us. Story 31. I've told the story before, but here it is again. When I was 23, shy and awkward, I was taken advantage of by someone I thought was a friend when I was too intoxicated to consent. She was a couple years older and the sister-in-law and roommate to my work friend. I was interested in dating her. We'd gone out a few times, but nothing came of it. Then a few weeks later, I went out drinking with some other coworkers, got completely hammered, and we all ended up back at work friend's place. I was so intoxicated I couldn't stand up or speak coherently. My friend's sister-in-law came out of her room, held me to my feet, and had her way with me. I only remember pieces after that. When I woke up on the couch the next morning, I asked her about it, and she told me she wasn't even attracted to me. She only did it because I was pure and she'd never had someone who's pure before. Everyone else that was there that night knew I went down and laughed about it. It completely destroyed my self-esteem and took me a long time to realize that I was essayed, and it wasn't my fault. If the roles had been reversed, I'd still be in prison today. Story 32. Signed up for a leadership role for a club in high school. This involved working with other student leaders at other schools throughout the country. This one girl leader in my region reached out and was very sweet, and we ended up flirting just a tad bit. Next night, she invited me to some video chat room thing. I was doing good to have an email account back then. I knew nothing of chat rooms. She said it didn't have to be on video, so when I clicked on the link, it was her and several other people, and the banner at the top said it was a vampire chat room. She also had a text banner going across her screen saying how much she loved me. I noped out of that real fast, and even dropped the leadership role, mainly because I realized I didn't have time for the responsibilities. The day after that, she sent out a multi-page email to all the leaders and the regional sponsor apologizing for being the cause of me dropping out and how she would resign if I requested. I hope her adult life is much less dramatic than her teen life. Story 33. I volunteered at a charity shop. A woman around my age would come in all the time and stay talking to me, would wait outside the shop for me. I never led her on and made it very clear I was happy, single, and had no intentions to be in a relationship with anyone. But other volunteers in the shop found it hilarious and would encourage her to bug me all shift. If she came in when I wasn't on shift, they would tell her when I was next in. I let my colleagues know she made me uncomfortable, but they just laughed it off. The fact that it was never taken seriously was what annoyed me. Luckily, she was harmless, just annoying. Story 34. I had a woman at a mall. First suggestion. We walked around a bit, went to a restaurant, then she suggested we go to a bar, so we did. She proceeded to keep buying me drink after drink, which I didn't want, and she kept saying I wasn't a man if I didn't want the drinks. We'd been talking well enough before then, but at this point, her whole demeanor changed and she seemed like a different person. I'd say one thing and she'd rant about how she hated it. Then eventually, she randomly said that I was too intoxicated to drive and that she was having her friend come pick us up to bring to her place, and said she couldn't wait. I don't know what the heck was going to happen. I don't know her friend or what was up. I texted my brother who drove over and got the hell out of there. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.